Hello, everyone. I probably should have had the foresight. I mean, I got quite excited. I thought you're all entering the room, and then slowly the number's going higher than the amount of people we have in the room. So I think somebody is taking the liberty of helping me load test a live presentation. Thank you very much. It would be ideal if you didn't, but I suppose that's the risk you take, right? But Elm will save us, right? No runtime exceptions. Alrighty. So the good starting point to this is that my laptop is disconnected from the internet. And we're back, all is well. All good. Alrighty. Hello, my name is Mario. I work at a company called Travelport Locomote. How many of you flew here on a plane? A bunch of you. There's roughly a 1 in 3, 1 in 4 chance that Travelport sold that ticket. That's what we do as a company. Locomote is a division with a product division where I work as head of technology, and we can almost say we have Elm in production. It is in production, just no one's using it yet. And you can find me, my GitHub handle is Super Mario. I'm under the same handle on the Elm Slack. So, it is the end of 2 long days of talks, and this is an Elm conference, and we're here to talk about Elm. And lots of people have been using Elm to talk about Elm. I'm going to use Elm to talk about Elm. Hopefully you find that interesting. So we're going to talk about using Elm to talk about Elm. I'm going to still use Elm to talk about using Elm to talk about Elm, and then we'll have some questions. That was the reason for the rather tacky name of Elmception, so that explains it. So I'm actually asking you to come on a bit of an adventure with me. So far we've been okay, so I think we'll be all right, but I'm being quite ambitious with technology in this talk. So if everything fails, or for those of you who either choose not to or cannot participate via phone, laptop, tablet, mobile, that's fine. You'll just get a regular presentation. So the motivation for this is, as a speaker, you often don't know very much about your audience. I'm usually wondering, what's your personal context? Is what I'm talking about resonating? Is it relevant to you? Am I going too fast? Are you confused? Are you bored? And I can ask a simple binary question like this, perhaps. Do you like Elm? And we can see how many of you do and how many of you don't. A couple of you have clearly invested your money in the wrong place. But this isn't really that much more effective than me asking you to raise your hands, right? And raising your hand doesn't require a mobile device with power and the internet. So at this kind of level, it's kind of more of a novelty. But what kept bothering me is how a presentation is a really one-sided affair. I stand here and I talk at you, and I have all these questions. Maybe you have questions. Maybe you see something on the slides and you don't get it. Does everyone else get it? Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. There's a whole lot of confusion in the room just generally. And for all intents and purposes, there's not much difference from you physically being here in this room and you simply watching online or watching the talk afterwards. And I would posit that YouTube is cheaper and more interesting than I am. So what's the point of you being here? So what I'd like to do today is not a conventional talk. It may not even be better than a regular talk, but it's an experiment, right? Something that I think our community values in terms of heading towards a position of potentially finding out a better way to do things. So what we're going to do is explore this. Everything that you're holding in your hands is built on Elm. It's a prototype that I've built to explore the idea of giving the audience something that they couldn't get from watching the video afterwards, making it worthwhile for you to actually be here on screen. So let me ask you a question that we couldn't answer really quickly by putting up our hands. My favorite color is blue. What's yours? I mean, the most exciting part of this for me is that this will never look the same for 2 audiences. Cool, so what I'm going to try to do today is I'm going to let you pick which parts of this project you're most interested in hearing about for the next 10 minutes. So it's going to be like a bunch of 2-minute lightning talks, but your choice. And you'll also be able to give me live feedback. I've got a bit of a thing here on the screen, which is terrifying for me. But at the same time, if the presentation is really bad, it's kind of your fault because you chose it. Alrighty, so let me give you a brief rundown of what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be offering you a selection of technical topics. I can talk about the architecture, how everything's working, how we're all linked up. I can talk about auto-generating Elm. If I were you, I would pick this one because it's really exciting for me. I can talk about the deployment of this app. Thibault made me deploy about 5 minutes before I came up on stage, and it seems to be working, so that's pretty cool. We can go behind the curtain. I can show you the secret control panel that I've got in my hands. I can talk about the full stack live reloading, which is interesting. If I've talked about auto-generating Elm, which you should select. And then I can give you my thoughts and opinions, if you care to hear them, such as how I've arrived at the conclusion that I'm a bad engineer, as well as future ideas for this project. Vote away. It's also struck me that I didn't really think about how much time I would give you to vote. So I suppose we'll just call it in 3, 2, 1, and that's what it is. Great. So I'm going to kick right into auto-generating Elm. Yes. Thank you. Okay. So let's think about making an effectful request outside of Elm, right? I've got some type A in my Elm world. I want to get that over to some sort of server to do some stuff on a particular backend or some web service. So generally what we think of is, well, I need some sort of encoder for A so I can get JSON stuff. I need some sort of request mechanism. Maybe it's a WebSocket request, maybe it's HTTP. It doesn't matter. It's another type that represents stuff that we're encapsulated along with A. And that's going to go into the server. And on the way back, the server is going to give me some sort of response wrapping something B. B might be the same as A, maybe not. On our end, we'd need a decoder for B. And then we've got B back in our Elm world. And we can use that. Cool, everyone's with me? Great. I'll just turn on the live confusion thing. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, didn't I? I didn't explain this. Let me just go back for a second. So this mechanism, right? This is a type-safe talk, emotionally type-safe. You only get to have 2 emotions, okay or confused. If you'd like to have a broader range of emotions, you can submit a pull request for my next talk. And the things at the bottom are just for you to be able to kind of express your thoughts. They'll be pinned as the talk goes through. And if you hit that little red one, that's a bookmark. You can put your email address in at the end of the talk, and I will email you all the points that you've bookmarked on the slides. Cool? All right, back we go. Could very well be. Yeah, I think people have gotten a little bit excited. Okay. Yeah, probably still load testing. That's okay. We've gotten far enough that I can fall back to the backup slides that I had ready in case this happened. We don't need screenshots of sadness because we've gotten through that part. So let me just kind of skip ahead and talk to the bit where I was. This is why we can't have nice things. Okay, so generally we've got Elm covering the encoder and the type, and we've got some JSON in between. In this particular project, I've got Haskell, but that's the non-interesting part. JSON in between and Elm on this side as well. And I'm sure some of you have experienced this where, especially if this is a project where you control both the server and the client, you end up changing a little thing there, and then changing a little thing there, changing a little thing there, changing a little thing there. You think you've got everything good because both things, well, at least the Elm side will type-safe compile. Depending on what you're using over that side, it may or may not. But the frustrating thing here was that you get no compile time guarantees here in the middle, and you're doing that kind of work twice. And really, if you think about it, the A and the B are both dictated by the server because it has to have the implementation there. Right? It has to concretely deal with those types usually, especially if it's something that is going to be dealing with other things, not just your Elm front end. The front end isn't necessarily going to be dictating what's happening there. So I thought about, well, what if I could do something different? What if I could take the stuff that I've got on the server and generate the decoders and the types on this end? Would that make things any easier? Well, it turns out when you've got something not safe and manually written, wedged in between two type-safe things that one is being generated, that middle thing actually becomes type-safe as well. You don't end up having to write any of the things because the intermediary format you just don't care about. You've got types and some sort of interchange in between that's all pure. So this is a real sample of code in the front end that you were using on your phones. And this is the server-side version. So if you missed that trick there, there's an overlay so you can see how different it is. Again, in this particular example, the Haskell's not the interesting part. It's just very convenient. It happens to be very close. But the cool thing is that the main benefit of doing it in languages that are this similar, or if you want to be as adventurous as Sebastian and go off the beaten track and try to run Elm on the server side as well, is that the cognitive load for matching these two up isn't very high. In fact, I never look at the Elm ones anymore. So all the stuff that I'm dealing with where I'm talking with a server, the stuff that's coming back, I only care about what I translate into the Elm world. All the cognitive load of the server stuff kind of stays with the server, so I thought that was really cool. Now, I've done absolutely nothing to contribute to this being possible, so I can take no credit whatsoever. Chris Jenkins, who's fantastic and runs the Elm meetups in London, has got an Elm export library that if you are interested in running server in Haskell, you could do this kind of thing, but I'm sure you could find other similar libraries or even implement your own. Cool. So the next thing that you guys asked for was full stack live reload. Full stack live reload is actually a live demo. Yay. All right. So the maybe immediately apparent, oh no, now you see my dirty working directory. The immediately apparent thing might be for you like, okay, well great, that's fine, we've got stuff on the server side and it's generating things, but what does that mean for my developer lifecycle? Well, the immediate problem was every time you want to compile, you need to compile all your server-side stuff. You need to run something to generate the Elm stuff, and only then can you compile the Elm stuff and then see if anything's gone wrong. So I thought, well, in the Elm world, we've got this idea of just sending off commands and letting things rerun themselves. So I built something similar. It's a little script called live. It just runs a live reloader for Elm that is looking at Elm files changing, and a live reloader for Haskell that is looking at Haskell files changing. And so what happens is both boot up. I'm kind of interleaving the output here, just so I can see. And the pink stuff is the stuff that's coming from Elm. The blue stuff is what's coming from my server side. There we go, Webpack has figured its stuff out. So if I were to now change something on the server side, so these are all the slide, oh sorry, you probably can't see that too well. These are all the slide types that we've got. This is one of the items that gets pushed into the front end because for all the slide types, like the dynamic slide types that my server supports, I want to have view handlers on the Elm side, right? And I never want it to be possible that that is broken. So let's say live fail, because I probably should have introduced a fail screen for how much fail. And so what that's done is it's kicked off the Haskell build. So that's going to go chug along and do its thing. And as part of that build process, once it compiles and it's all type safe and everything's all good, it's going to run an exporter. And that exporter is going to take this particular union type, and it's going to write it out. So you saw there, it was processing, and it even ran Elm format on it, so it actually looks like real proper Elm code. And now we've changed a server-side file and got an Elm-side compiler failure. Everyone with me? You're going to have to give me thumbs up the low-tech way. All right, awesome. Cool. That's basically it. So this none of this stuff is released at the moment, but maybe if it gets good enough quality, I will release it. Or you can come ask me in Slack, and I can give you a heads up on it. Secret control panel. Sure. So, it's a little bit difficult to see. This is a debugging screen. So basically, I've got a live preview for myself and my own device of what's actually up on the slides, the screen that's being sent to devices that are participating and subsequently abusing, and all of the trigger modes. So it's really, really raw. Like I said, it's a prototype. I've got the agenda sitting there for me of what you guys selected. I've got the different modes for the different screens that you've been seeing, as well as I've got my presentation slides in there and some fast triggers on questions. I have the ability to take a live queried feed of... It's not showing up. Oh, because we changed stuff and the build is failing. Sure. If the build wasn't failing, you'd see a graph there. Again, nowhere near as pretty as any of the graphs you've seen from anybody else in this conference. So I can just gauge a sense of how many of you are okay, or how many you've confused, which I can't do, unfortunately, and an ability to ask a live question, such as why, I don't know, sure, and be able to post that out and get that back. But anyway, this is all... Yeah, it's still live. There's still some of you there. Awesome. Okay, cool. Cracking on. I'm a bad engineer. You want to know why I'm a bad engineer? Sure. Firstly, I'm a bad engineer because I can't find where my slides are. Alrighty. So, it's a bit of a sensationalist title. What I should have entitled it was Things Elm Has Taught Me, but I thought I'd just jump straight to the conclusion. But more or less, I have realized that I optimized the wrong things. I'm not going to labor this point, because I think Evan and Richard, to my great joy, articulated much better than I could, but duplication and dry, I don't know. It's like I've built this obsessive compulsive desire to abstract and dry absolutely everything everywhere, and put all the things in files. I think my very first Elm project, it got to 15, 20 functions or something. I thought, that's bad. I need about 15, 20 files to solve this problem. But as a result of that, I've been really thinking about why I have those particular I guess habits, right? I've been programming for close to a decade now. So I was thinking about the workflow, contrasting going back from Elm to normal kind of imperative or non-statically typed languages. You write a bunch of code and you think it's good code, right? And then you realize it's broken code because you run it and something's wrong. And you fix that and you're like, right, I've got good code again. Yep. And then you're like, it's actually wrong code, which is slightly different from broken code, right? Because it's done exactly what you've asked it to do, that just happened to be the wrong thing. All right? And you're like, okay, yeah. And you fix that, and you think you've got good code, and everyone's happy, and you've written tests, and you deploy it into production, and then weeks later, you find out it's broken code. All right? And with Elm, it was kind of like, I've got good code, no. I've got good code, no. And it kind of just kind of nopes you all the way to the point where you're like, right, well, I know it's not broken anymore, but I don't know if it's wrong. And then weeks later, you find out that potentially something's wrong. And so why I think this is important is it forced me to think about problems with my code as a whole, or problems with all code as a whole that I'd experience in any case. And it made me realize that this is what the proportion looked like. Right? The vast, vast, vast majority of the stuff that I do is just broken. And Elm shows me that because it stops me straight away, right? Which is a major difference from what I do in other languages. And removing this, like the best solution to a problem is just removing the problem entirely. Removing this kind of seems obvious now, right? In hindsight. And I really struggle to think of any good justification for why you should work in a language that allows all of that to happen. Programming without purity and type inference seems crazy to me now. I don't know if we say that enough, or whether, something I was talking about with Evan, how do we convey that to the community at large without, it's that kind of thing where like, until you've tasted it, you can't really understand what it is. But I think if we found new ways or other ways to kind of communicate that idea, that'd be really good. Because the only alternative now, I feel, at least for me, is that it's like this in every other contexts, right? You know, and maybe that's fine. I'm not saying that for every single application. I'm not saying let's go and you know, submit a pull request to Linus Torvalds and say, hey, we should rebuild the Linux kernel in Elm. Like that's not what I'm suggesting. But I think if you're in such a high critical performance environment or somewhere where you're willing to throw away all those guarantees, that's probably what's happening, right? Like you're in an environment where it's an extreme environment. It's fine for everything to be on fire. But yeah, I can't justify it for myself anymore. Okay, last one being architecture. Everyone with me still? Excellent. So you guys wanted to know about how the architecture of this works. Well, now that I know I need rate limiting, you'll all be familiar with this, hopefully. If you're not, this is just a stolen image from the Elm guide about how the kind of Elm runtime roughly works. And if you guys have done components, you've probably done something like this, where you've stacked another component within your update function. So we get these kind of things going. Generally, we talk about those being two components, right? But the interesting thing is that the only thing here that's Elm specific is the Elm runtime, right? So if you get rid of the Elm runtime, well, we've just got boring functions, right? Like Richard said before. So that can be any runtime. The pattern is usable wherever you want. So I wanted to use that pattern with a server runtime. And as you've probably guessed, use WebSockets to connect that server runtime to the Elm runtime. So you've got a bunch of server messages coming back over WebSockets, and then Elm may or may not send messages based on that. Actually, sorry, it will always send messages based on that. It may or may not send any commands subsequently. And then you've got the user making actions, such as abusing the system, which sends too many commands to the server, and then the server struggles. So yeah, that part's Elm. So the way that this is working for all the devices that you've got is I'm actually shipping the full Elm stack. So all my slides, everything, absolutely everything's on there, which is why I'm on a separate connection here on my iPad, controlling a separate one here on the screen, controlling all of your devices there. And that's just the way it's working, just shipping the same code to every single device, and then we're all collaborating through the central server. Cool. You are still welcome to use your devices and spam it if you want. It's just, you can still bookmark stuff. I'll still try to give you stuff afterwards. Okay, cool. How are we doing on time, Tibor? About ready to wrap up? Or do you guys want to hear the last two topics? Awesome. All right, cool. Future ideas. So I said that this talk was talking about talking. Actually, I might swap it up. I'm going to talk about deployment first, and then I'll end with future ideas. So deployment isn't, again, anything too exciting. The huge, basically, too long, didn't read is use Heroku. I should be a sales guy for Heroku. They should pay me commission because they just advertise it so much. The amount of effort involved for platform as a service is really quite phenomenal. So I'm using just all the Heroku build pack star. So build pack stack is building the Haskell side of things. Just the vanilla Node.js one that the Heroku ships themselves does all the packages that actually brings in Elm. And then we're using Webpack to build and compress everything. I'm using Yarn because, I don't know, at the time, that was the most popular library, and they got cats, so you should check for yourself next week. It probably be something different. I hear NPM's back again. And Webpack module bundler, I've heard of the closure compiler as well, but again, who can keep up? If you don't know what Webpack does, takes stuff and transforms into other stuff. Basically, the problem that we have is we've got Elm files and we've got JS files still. Because I haven't yet done everything purely in Elm, so maybe I can throw that away eventually. But the JavaScript pulls in the Elm stuff and mounts it, so Webpack takes both of those things in together and gives us a single JavaScript file. You're all probably familiar with that, yes? Yes, yeah, all right, easy. So the Elm Webpack loader, I believe it's Richard's, but it's now with Elm Community, originally, yeah. So yeah, you can thank Richard for kicking that off. But yeah, just use it. Again, I'm not contributing anything here. The cool thing, though, about this is Elm make will give you a big fat file. Webpack will strip out a bunch of stuff. And then the gzip is 122 kilobytes, which I think is pretty amazing for shipping a full presentation, including everything, to everybody's devices. Cool. So that's that. And I will just run through then the future thoughts. So, There's a lot of assumptions that I think we make as speakers. I make an assumption about what you know in order for me to set a baseline for my talk. I make an assumption about where you're from in order to set up the language, how complicated I'm going to talk or how simple I'm going to talk. I make an assumption about how well you see. I make an assumption about how well you hear. And I don't think that generally a stock standard kind of presentation does a lot of things to aid with that. So some things that I was hoping to get in that I didn't have time for, but I'd love to explore, is something like live translation. If you've all got your own devices open in front of you, and you've got my presentation notes, and I've built them in such a way that you can choose your language and have that language here. I mean, we're all in Paris, France, not exactly the most English of countries. So maybe it should have had that option to be there in French. Obviously, then we start getting UI issues. With Japanese, it's even worse. With Arabic, it's completely off the side. But it would be a cool thing to explore and to think about and to have in our talks to make our talks more accessible, I think. Color and contrast modes were also mentioned by Jakob and some other people during this talk. Maybe if you have a visual impairment, for you to be able to have a mode that selects the color scheme or the contrast that works best for you. You can do that independently on your device, regardless of the experience that's on screen. I think even more challengingly would be screen reader support. Just think for a moment of all the messages that I conveyed to you in a split second by showing this slide, right? The kind of stuff that you'd be missing out on, the fact that slide has changed, the fact that it's a title slide, that it's got text. With screen reader support, it could actually read that out to somebody sitting in their own chair with their own device with maybe an earphone in, letting them know there's a musical icon there with 2 quavers. And live questions, which as you can see, live stuff is hard. So I've got live questions where I'm asking you a static question, you're responding, but what would be really cool is if there was some ability for you to ask me stuff in real time, and I don't know how you would do that without interrupting the speaker's flow, right? It'd be challenging to have some sort of mechanism, but sometimes, people are too scared to put up their hands, but, I may be missing that the audience generally is not understanding something, or there's something big that might have gone wrong that I missed. So I'd love to explore the ability to have that kind of interaction with the audience as well. Okay, and I suppose the finale for this, if we can get it to work still, two seconds. Like I mentioned before, you guys have all paid a lot of money to be here, right? And it's I think, especially in this day and age of instant gratification, it's a huge privilege to have a captive audience to talk about any topic for any amount of time. So someone's found my admin screen, perhaps. I think the last thing that I wanted to kind of put on the line is, what if us as presenters didn't have just the ability to come up here to talk whatever we wanted at you and then step off the stage and have a few key select people come and pat us on the back and say, that was amazing. What if all the people that were like, I didn't really get much out of that, or that thing didn't really make sense? What if you could actually give that feedback? So the question that I would pose to you guys now is something that makes me vulnerable, but I think is kind of important. Despite everything that's happened in the talk, I would ask you, how was the adventure? Thanks.